When I first married Daniel, I thought my life was finally complete. He was charming, successful, and attentive in ways that made me believe I had found the man of my dreams. Our wedding was beautiful, our honeymoon was magical, and for a while, everything felt perfect. But as years passed, I began to notice little cracks in the facade he had so carefully built. He was coming home late more often, always with the same excuse about work meetings and deadlines. His phone became glued to his hand, and the moment I entered the room, he'd flip it over or slide it into his pocket. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself he was just stressed, maybe even planning a surprise. But deep down, my instincts screamed something else. One night, I decided to test my gut feeling. While Daniel showered, I picked up his phone and quickly scrolled through his messages. My hands trembled as I saw thread after thread with a woman named Sophie. The conversations weren't just professional, they were intimate, filled with words no married man should ever send to another woman. My heart pounded in my chest, and the world around me blurred. He wasn't just working late, he was spending his nights with her. I confronted him that night, but Daniel was clever. He smiled, shrugged, and called me paranoid. He told me Sophie was just a colleague, that I was reading too much into harmless jokes. He even made me feel guilty, as if my mistrust was the real problem. For a while, I almost believed him. But the seed of doubt had already taken root, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that my marriage was a lie. I started watching him closely. I tracked his spending and noticed charges from expensive restaurants I had never been to. I found receipts for gifts, jewelry, perfume, clothing that I had never received. Every discovery was another dagger to my heart, but instead of crumbling, I grew stronger. I realized I couldn't let him manipulate me anymore. I needed proof, undeniable proof, and then I would take everything he thought he could get away with. Quietly, I hired a private investigator. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the only way to expose the truth. For weeks, the investigator followed Daniel, documenting every detail of his double life. When I received the final report, my hands shook as I flipped through the photos. Daniel holding Sophie's hand, Daniel kissing her in a parking lot, Daniel walking into a hotel with her late at night. My stomach turned, but my mind was clear. I finally had the ammunition I needed. I didn't confront him immediately. No, that would have been too easy for him. Instead, I smiled, pretended everything was fine, and played the role of the loving wife. Inside, I was burning with anger, but I knew patience was the key. I began meeting with a lawyer, carefully planning my next move. I transferred money into a private account, documented every expense, and built my case piece by piece. Daniel continued his affair, blind to the storm brewing around him. He thought he was untouchable, that I would never leave. But the day of reckoning came faster than he expected. One evening, he came home late again, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I greeted him with a smile and handed him an envelope. He opened it, expecting maybe a bill or a letter. Instead, he pulled out the stack of photos from the investigator. His face drained of color, and for the first time, he had no words. "I know everything, Daniel," I said calmly. "Every lie, every dinner, every night in her arms. And now, you're going to pay for it." The next weeks were a whirlwind of court filings, lawyer meetings, and tense standoffs. Daniel tried to fight, of course. He begged at first, then threatened, then tried to paint me as unstable. But the evidence was undeniable. The judge looked at the photos, the receipts, the text messages, and it was clear who the liar was. I sat in the courtroom, composed and steady, while Daniel fidgeted in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. When the verdict was finally delivered, I felt a rush of satisfaction so powerful it almost brought me to tears. The court awarded me the house, the majority of our assets, and full control of the joint accounts. Daniel was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the bitter taste of defeat. His mistress, Sophie, quickly disappeared from the picture once she realized Daniel no longer had the wealth and charm he once flaunted. The day I moved back into the house, I stood at the window and looked out at the garden where we had once laughed together. I thought of all the lies, all the betrayal, and for the first time in years I felt free. Daniel had tried to break me, but in the end, I had broken him. Of course, people whispered. Friends asked questions, some even took his side. But I didn't care. I had lived too long in the shadow of his deception, and now I was finally in control. The woman who once doubted herself, who cried in silence at night, had been replaced by someone stronger, someone unafraid. Months passed, and I rebuilt my life. I focused on myself, my career, my happiness. Daniel tried to call a few times, leaving pathetic voicemails about how he had made a mistake, how he missed me, how he wanted to make things right. I never answered. Why would I? I had already taken everything from him, not just the house and money, but his pride, his sense of power, his illusion of control. My revenge wasn't just about the court ruling or the financial victory. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing him that betrayal has consequences. And as I lay in bed at night, in a home that was now truly mine, I couldn't help but smile. He thought he could cheat and still win. But in the end, I took everything. Even now, when I walk past him in town occasionally, I see the bitterness in his eyes. He looks older, worn down, a man who once had it all and lost it all because he couldn't keep his promises. Meanwhile, I walk with my head held high, a reminder to him and to myself that justice, in the end, is always worth waiting for.